Hey everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be looking at development in St. Johns County, specifically how all this crazy growth is impacting residents, especially the whole new construction versus, keeping the area looking beautiful thing. I think a lot of people feel like things are moving way too fast. We see more and more questions about, what happens when development just like barrels ahead of the infrastructure that's needed.
Yeah, it's interesting how this isn't just like a St. Johns County issue. I mean, it's really happened everywhere you see rapid growth. And it really can change how livable an area is.
For sure. And I think one of the biggest examples of this is literally right in front of us. We're talking about the trees, or I guess the lack of trees. Global Forest Watch actually reports that St. Johns County lost a ridiculous 40% of its tree canopy between 2001 and 2022. I mean, that's not just a number. That's like a whole different landscape.
Right. And we got to remember that trees are basically infrastructure themselves. They help with shade, obviously, but they also improve the air. And they even help with absorbing stormwater, which is super important with all this development.
Okay, so let's talk politics for a minute. St. Johns County Commissioner Krista Joseph has been trying to save trees. With all this development pressure, last year she proposed like 14 different things to try and protect trees. But the commission at the time said no to all of them.
Well, and now with the recent elections, there's kind of this new hope because the power on the commission has shifted. The question is, will this new commission actually care about the environment? Or will they just keep siding with developers? One person to keep an eye on is Commissioner Whitehurst. He's been a big supporter of development in the past.
And that support for development, hasn't always meant that the infrastructure gets improved to actually handle all that growth.
Exactly. Like traffic. Traffic's become a huge problem for people living in St. Johns County. And it's not just annoying, it really affects their lives. Longer commutes mean less time with their families, more stress, and it can even make businesses think twice about moving to a place with such bad traffic.
I've talked to people whose commutes are literally twice or three times as long as they used to be. And they're losing hours every day just sitting in traffic. And it's like Commissioner Whitehurst is all about bringing in more businesses and development. But people are worried that he's not doing enough to make sure that the roads and stuff can handle all the extra people and cars.
Yeah, and it's like this lack of planning just creates more problems. Think about it. More traffic means it takes longer for emergency vehicles to get places, plus the air gets worse with more cars on the road, and then the whole area just becomes less enjoyable to live in. It's like a downward spiral.
So let's switch gears a bit and talk about why developers like clear-cutting land so much. We spoke with Master Arborist Danny Lippy, and he gave us some insight into why this happens. Basically, it comes down to money.
Yeah, the flatter and clearer the land is, the more they can build on it, which means more money for them. It's a classic case of profit versus the environment. Asheville, North Carolina had a similar problem, and they ended up charging different fees for tree removal based on the size and type of tree, and that actually helped reduce clear cutting. Plus, it gave the city money to plant new trees.
So maybe this new commission will be more open to ideas like that tiered fee structure. Even though they rejected Commissioner Joseph's proposals last year, let's look at some of her main suggestions, especially the ones that could actually make life better for residents. One of the big ones is increasing the fees that developers pay to cut down large trees. Right now, you can remove a huge oak tree for just $400.
That's crazy low. If they had to pay more, maybe they'd think twice about cutting down so many trees, or at least they'd have to plant more new ones to make up for it.
Another idea is making developers leave a buffer of trees around new construction projects. These buffers would kind of act like a shield to lessen the impact of the development on the surrounding area.
Right. They're really important for reducing runoff and noise pollution. Plus, they just make the area look better. Imagine a new development going up right next to your house, with no trees or anything in between. The noise and the dust would be awful. Tree buffers give some much-needed space between construction and where people live.
And it's not just about peace and quiet,
Yeah.
Those trees also help protect our rivers and stuff.
Oh, yeah, totally. They're like giant sponges soaking up the rain and filtering out all the bad stuff before it gets to the water. If we don't have those trees, we end up with way more runoff, which can cause flooding and erosion. And all the pollution just goes straight into the rivers and stuff, which hurts the animals and could even mess with our drinking water.
So it sounds like these buffers are really important, not just for making things look nice, but for keeping everyone healthy. And it seems like Commissioner Joseph really gets that. She's not saying we need to stop development altogether, but she wants a more balanced approach, one that works for developers and residents.
Yeah, it's definitely a tough balance. But I think it's a mistake to just keep building and building without making sure we have the infrastructure to handle it. I mean, we can already see what happens when you do that. The roads are jammed, the schools are overcrowded, even emergency services are stretched thin.
And it feels like Commissioner Whitehurst is always reacting to problems instead of preventing them. We're constantly trying to catch up, fixing things after they've already become a huge mess. Wouldn't it be better to just invest in the infrastructure we need from the start so we can grow without making everyone miserable?
Right. That's the big question, isn't it? Some people say that if we make things too tough for developers, or if we force them to spend a ton on infrastructure, it'll slow down the whole economy. They think all the new development is worth a little inconvenience. But I think they're missing the big picture. Eventually, all those problems with infrastructure are going to cost us a lot more. Not just money, but our quality of life, too.
Exactly. All those costs eventually get passed on to us. Higher taxes to pay for roads and schools,
Yep.
or expensive houses, and then the whole area just becomes less appealing, and then there's all the stuff you can't even measure,
Right.
like the stress of being stuck in traffic every day, or sending your kids to a school that's bursting at the seams, or just feeling like your community is losing its character.
Yeah, it's like they're choosing short-term gains over long-term sustainability. And unfortunately, it's the residents who end up suffering the consequences. They're the ones dealing with the traffic and the crowded schools, and ultimately, a lower quality of life.
So what can we do about it? How can residents make sure they're heard and that their concerns are taken seriously?
I think the first step is to get involved. Go to those commission meetings, speak up during the public comment section. Hold those elected officials accountable. Let them know that you expect them to prioritize sustainable growth and responsible development, and that you care about the well-being of the community.
It's also important to stay informed. Do your research on the candidates running for local office. Find out what they think about development and infrastructure, and vote for the ones who share your values. Local elections might not seem as glamorous as the national ones, but they have a much bigger impact on your day-to-day life.
Definitely. And don't be afraid to challenge the way things are done. Ask tough questions, demand transparency, and push for solutions that benefit everyone, not just special interest groups or developers.
We're seeing more and more resident groups popping up to advocate for responsible development and to fight back against projects that threaten the beauty and livability of the county. Joining one of these groups can give you a bigger voice and connect you with people who share your concerns.
I think those grassroots efforts are so important. It's how we hold our elected officials accountable and make sure that decisions about development are made with the community in mind. It's about sending a message that we're not going to sit back and accept the consequences of unchecked development and inadequate infrastructure.
So even though things might look kind of bleak in St. Johns County right now, there's still hope. If we work together, we can make a difference. It's about taking back control of the narrative, shaping the future of our community, and making sure that growth benefits everyone, not just the select few. We'll be right back to wrap up this deep dive with some final thoughts and things to think about. All right, so let's kind of zoom out for a second and recap what we've talked about today. I think it's pretty clear that St. Johns County is at like a turning point. All this growth and development is happening so fast. But we got to ask ourselves, is it worth it? I mean, we've seen how losing all those trees and not having the infrastructure to keep up is really affecting how people live here.
Yeah, and I think the important thing to remember is that all these things are connected. You can't really solve one problem without thinking about the others. Like those tree buffers we talked about. They're not just good for dealing with runoff. They also help with the air quality and reduce noise pollution. So it's like a win-win for residents.
And we can't forget about Commissioner Joseph's ideas for protecting trees. Even if the commission doesn't approve all of them, some of those measures could really make a difference, in terms of lessening the impact of all this development.
Totally, like increasing the fees for cutting down trees.
Yeah.
Might make developers think twice before just clearing a whole lot. And making them leave those natural buffers just makes sense for the environment and for people's wallets.
So what does all this mean for you? Well, for one thing, it means that you, as someone who cares about this community, have a really important role to play in shaping the future of St. Johns County.
Exactly. You got to get involved. Go to the commission meetings, speak your mind, make sure your elected officials know what you think, let them know that you want sustainable growth and responsible development, and that you care about the quality of life for everyone living here.
And it's not just about complaining about traffic or missing the trees. It's about pushing for solutions that benefit everyone in the long run.
Right. It's about thinking about the bigger picture.
So here's a final thought for you to chew on. What if instead of seeing development and the environment as like enemies, we started looking for ways to make them work together? What if we asked ourselves, How can we grow in a way that actually makes St. Johns County better? A way that keeps its unique charm and beauty. That's the challenge and the opportunity. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.